Hey guys, welcome back to another painting guide. In today's video I will tell you some of the dirty little secret color tricks I use to make my models look more professional than they have any right to be, so that you can copy them and do the same.
Hey guys, I'm Zoltan and you're watching PHLANSMINIATURE. Normally when we talk about colors, I would pull out a color wheel and start explaining why I'm using one color or the other, but I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I'll just straight up give you a couple of recipes that will make your models instantly look better if you start using them. And to make it somewhat organized, I will go through them in RGB order, so from red to green to blue, and I'll finish with a couple of extra ones in the end.
By the way, the channel is getting close to 20,000 subscribers, but 75% of you are still not subscribed. So if you like my content, I would really appreciate it if you click that very attractive looking little button under the video. And while you are at it, I also have a Patreon with a ton of PDF and video guides that you could check out as well if you click the link in the description.
Alright, now that everybody is subscribed, let's start with all the tricks we can do when we paint red. Now red is not exactly an easy color to paint, and to make that even worse, there are very few models that don't have at least some red on them, and there are quite a few that use it as their main color. Sometimes we need it on a huge cape, sometimes on some smaller decorative elements, and sometimes 80% of the model will be red. This means that we have to deal with this color a lot, and since it's such an in-your-face kind of tone, we have to get it to look good, otherwise it will ruin everything else around it. And the most obvious thing we can do is to paint blue or purple shadows, and this might sound weird, but hear me out. Most people will either try to paint red with black shadows or with simply super dark red ones. Painting them black is theoretically good because it will create a nice big contrast, and that means that we don't have to push our highlights too much. But the black will make the red seem dull and desaturated, which is not ideal. Painting only red creates the opposite problem. It keeps the nice colors, but there won't be enough contrast for us to work with, so we'll have to move into pink or orange with the highlights. More about that later. And the solution is to use blue or purple colors in the shadows. This will give us the best of both worlds. The contrast will be high enough so we can keep the red tones even in the highest highlights, and since we're using nice saturated colors in the shadows, we can keep the overall surface nice and colorful as well. You can start from a blue or purple prime model, you can glaze in the blue in the shadows after a red base coating, or you can use an airbrush to spray on the darker blue tones. No matter which method you use, it will look better than simply using black or red.
If you have never tried using blue shadows for red elements, it might sound like some weird high-level technique that only pro painters use, but try it out once and I promise you will never want to go back to black shadows ever again. And the cool thing is that you can reverse this trick and use red as a shadow for blue things too, as you will see a little bit later.
So that's the shadows, but what about the highlights? As I already alluded to earlier, highlighting red can be a pain even more so than shading it. If you want to go past a certain brightness, you need to mix some white into the red, and as soon as you do that, you will immediately lose vibrancy, and if you overdo it just a little bit, you will end up with a pink surface instead of a red one. So instead, you can start adding orange into the red highlights and even paint your final ones with pure orange colors. Then if you want to really push the contrast, you can use a mix of orange and white in the final highlights. As long as you are using a mostly orange tone and don't mix the white into the red, you will be able to keep the surface nice and saturated while also creating super contrasty highlights. You still need to make sure to keep the orange highlights on the small side and maintain enough red on the surface so it still looks red with orange highlights and not just orange overall. But the orange gives you a lot more leeway than pink would, and it also results in a much more vibrant, colorful end result. And of course, for some bonus points, you can combine the two tricks, the bluish shadows and the orange highlights, if you really want a super saturated red with lots of contrast. We will get back to red related to the other colors later, since it's a color that plays nicely with a lot of others, especially in the shadows, but before I move on to the green, here is a little bonus trick you can do with red. You can take a reddish brown color, for example whole red from AK Interactive, and you can glaze it onto almost any other color and surface. This works especially great when it's something that is close to the ground, like some robes or capes or the lower legs of Space Marines, something like that. The end result is a dirty, worn look, similar to how dirt accumulates on something that is brushing the ground, but at the same time it's also nice and colorful and doesn't take away from the saturation of the model like a wash would. And by the way, I know that I said in the beginning that I won't mention color theory, but in case you want to actually understand why these color tricks work the way they do, you can find a lot of resources about color theory and a million other topics as well on Skillshare, the sponsor of this video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community with thousands of classes led by experts across art, illustration, design, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your hobbies and skills, or even side hustles in my case, to the next level. If you're searching for resources to learn about volumes and shapes, or even everyone's favorite topic, color theory, then you can find a ton of material to learn from on Skillshare, so you can use it on your miniature projects later on. But we are not limited to just art and miniature related courses either. For example, I found a great course about video creation and script writing by MKBHD, one of my favorite tech YouTubers that I am in the process of watching. And I already saved some courses about photography and video editing in my classes as well, so I can improve my miniature photography and to pick up some editing tips so I can make even better videos for you guys.
If that sounds interesting to you, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. It's literally a whole month of free learning, so why not give it a try? Thanks for Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
Alright, let's move on to the next color on our list, which is green. And green is a selfish color because you can use other colors to enhance it like we did with the red, but unlike red, it's not really working great as a shadow color for others. But there are still plenty of things we can do with green, and the first thing is of course to change the colors of shadows again. Instead of a darker green or plain black, we can use either a red or purple shadow to shade our green surfaces. Just like with the red, this will keep the colors nice and vibrant, much more so than a black shadow would, but it will also create enough contrast for us to work with. As you can see, green is really happy to take a red shadow, but unfortunately it doesn't really work the other way around. Green is just selfish like that. Alright, so how about the highlights? Well, as I said, green is a little easier to work with than red, so if you mix in white, you won't get a completely different color, but you will still lose saturation. And that can be fine, for example, when you are going for a deliberately desaturated look, like I did here on this necromancer. But when you want to maintain a nice and vibrant look, you can use yellow instead. Yellow is a great highlight color for green, and it's cutting you a lot more slack too compared to the orange we used on the red. You don't really have to be afraid that your green cape turns into yellow just because your highlights got a bit too large. Now for those extra bonus points, you can once again combine the two methods and paint something that is purplish in the shadows, green in the midtones and yellow in the highlights, and chances are that it will look pretty good. Just look at this big hammer I painted on this troll, or the blades in the hands of these Varang war maidens. So just remember, green, purple and yellow is a color trio made in heaven, and when you want something to look really striking and colorful, it's hard to go wrong with this combo.
I will tell you a little secret involving green at the very end of this video, but for now let's move on to one of my favorite colors and talk about blue.
First of all, whoever paints black shadows on a blue surface is committing a crime against humanity, because a red shadow on blue looks infinitely better. Look at these two models side by side and tell me that the blue on the primary skeleton doesn't look way better than the other one. I painted both of these models quite early in my career, and the difference between the two is that the captain has a red shadow color everywhere. I did this by spraying the model red first with an airbrush and then spraying the blue over that from a zenithal angle, but you can achieve a similar effect layering over a red primer, or even by base coating a blue first and then glazing in the red into the shadows. Just remember that blue and red are buddies. They are happy to serve as wingmen for each other. It doesn't matter if it's a blue surface with red shadows or a red one with blue shadows, both look great. But blue is kinda shy when it comes to working together with other colors other than white in the highlights without significantly changing how it looks. But when it comes to using it as a shadow color, it doesn't have an exclusive relationship with red. It's happy to work together with almost any other color. Remember how we used the reddish brown color to give the impression that something is worn and dirty? A nice dark bluish tone, like dark sea blue for example, can be used in a similar way to give the model a sense of darkness and gloominess. Similarly to the red, you can apply this as a glaze either with a brush or even better with an airbrush, and it will deepen the shadows and creates a really gloomy and dark atmosphere. Blue also has an interesting relationship with orange and yellow, in that blue with orange, gold or yellow decorations will always look good, and in turn a bluish green tone can work with these colors as an effect, for example a verdigris effect on some bronze surfaces. Other than that, blue is a much better highlight color for black than pure grey, since it can still sneak a little color into something that is otherwise completely desaturated.
Alright, so these were the RGB color tips I promised in the beginning, so now let's finish with two bonus ones.
First of all, yellow can serve as a universal highlight color, which in many ways is superior to white. Those who have been watching my videos probably noticed that I tend to mix in something like ice yellow into my highlights instead of white, which would be the more obvious choice. Adding white to anything will increase the brightness, but it will also desaturate it at the same time, so if you want to maintain saturation, the trick is to introduce pure white as late in the process as possible and reduce the area we are painting with it as much as we can. Yellow is our friend when it comes to this, since it works together with almost any other color and it maintains vibrancy much better than pure white would. So next time when you paint something and you need bright highlights, start mixing in a light yellow color until you can't make it lighter anymore and only add white at that point. The bonus effect we get out of this is that if you use yellow mixes as your highlight colors all over the model, it will add a very distinct cohesive look and atmosphere to the end result. And the final trick I want to give you is for skin tones. Now, skin tones are a huge topic which would deserve its own video, but here's a little color combination you can do to make your skin tones immediately better. You might have noticed that when you paint the usual combination of skin tone paints on your minis, the end result looks quite flat no matter how smooth and nice you make it, and it's a far cry from the amazing results you see from pro painters. So next time you paint a face, do the same, but when you are done with the skin tones, add two more steps. First, take a light magenta paint, thin it down a lot, and glaze it from the midtones into the shadows. Just add a couple of super thin layers, starting your strokes from the middle of the face and ending them in the deepest shadows. When you are done, take some bright, slightly yellowish green paint, like for example laser yellow, and glaze it super thinly in between the midtones and the highlights. This probably sounds like madness, since neither of those colors has any right to be on a human face, especially the green, right? But with a little effort, only those two glazes will help you paint way more realistic and striking looking faces.
And with that, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you guys heard and saw something interesting that you can use to improve your own paint jobs. If you're interested in seeing these tricks in action, I have a lot more videos on YouTube and PDF painting guides, as well as more real-time painting footage on Patreon, so check those out as well. Before I sign off, I wanted to thank my Patreon members for their support. They are the ones that make this channel possible, especially the ones in the captain level. Thank you guys, see you in the next one.